Now, if you bring a 5-year-old girl into your garden, she's going to see and smell exactly what I saw and smelled. But all she can say is, these are pretty and they look nice and they smell nice. That's all she knows, right? Because she doesn't know flowers. She doesn't know a chrysanthemum from a tulip. She doesn't even know those words. Now, most adults are like that little girl as regards people. They don't know what they're looking at. That is why in the United States, more than 50% of the marriages end in divorce. Clearly, those people did not know what they were looking at. And that is why all over the world, people routinely elect morons and criminals to run the governments because they don't understand them. I look at something, how did this person get elected? How could this be, right? Clearly, the people who vote for this person did not understand. Now, I can analyze that person, of course, these 35 skills, and know exactly who that person is, better than that person knows himself.
Welcome to your Wordless Podcast, the space where we redefine success, self-worth, and transformation. I am Nick Nieras, the soul-centered architect of transformation, helping you unlock your highest potential and build a legacy beyond limits. Now, whether it is self-mastery, career breakthroughs, or wealth creation, this is where change begins. Now, let's dive in. Can you please share with us what was it like growing up as a gym marshal?
Okay, well, those are two different questions, and I'll answer them both. The first thing I should say, to give some context to all of this, is that I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I crafted a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septimics. It's in the book, Septimics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. As far as growing up, I have no memory of a time when I was not intensely interested in learning everything taught in every university. Now, of course, that's impossible because nobody lives that long, but the drive was there and it still is. I started school at 3, and I've been engaged in education my entire life to this very day, one way or another.
Wow, you started at 3. So when you're saying 28 years of formal education, what do you mean by that?
I was in class for 28 years.
Wow, okay. Now, the question, what would you like the audience to know about you?
Well, I kind of said that already about being the developer of Septimics. But the only other thing I think is relevant is to let them know that I am a polymathic intellectual whose areas of expertise include psychology, philosophy, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, metaphysics, military science, political science, physical culture, education, human potential organization, and music. And I hold a Bachelor of Science cum laude from City University of New York.
Okay, so Mr. Marshall, I am now, when reading your profile, I'm curious myself, like, how would one understand or identify themselves as polymathic? Is it because of their sheer drive, or is it because, they enroll themselves in different, degrees or courses because they just have this deep, deep drive to know about all this knowledge?
Polymath is someone who's learned in multiple disparate subjects.
Mm.
Historical examples, famous historical examples are Erasmus and Jefferson. There aren't too many of us now because the education system militates against it. They push you into specialization. So, for example, I have many educated friends. I have a friend who has a degree in math. He knows more math than I do, but I know more about everything else. I have another friend who has a master's degree in engineering from MIT. He knows more about engineering than I do, but I know more about everything else. I have another friend who's actually a rocket scientist, and he knows more about rocket science than I do, but I know more about everything else. So that's kind of what a polymath is. deeply interested in learning any legitimate subject and am continually learning all the time.
Mm.
This is what happened eventually. Is, see, when I started out, I was a normal student, history meant history to me and geometry meant geometry. Now, in my mind, after all these years, it's all one big blob. So I really don't differentiate in my mind between any of the subjects in which I specialize.
I love
So
that.
I have kind of a unique take on things.
Hmm.
And I think that helped me to discover Septimics because I brought a polymathic view to it and I was able to see it for what it was when it appeared.
Why I'm asking is because I have felt kind of different growing up as well, because I've had this different interests, and I've ventured into different industries myself. So, and I have this, my dad, he, growing up is always like, okay, you need to focus on certain things. And now that you've learned this so many things, and learning that I'm also jumping into a second career or other interest, right? He's like, the first thing he says, please focus on one thing. Why I'm saying is because there are parents, and I've lived it myself, there are parents who don't really support that. And I know we're going to talk about your septemics afterwards, but I want to know, what is your take on people or parents who has kids that are polymathic?
Well, I can't comment on parents because I would have to know a specific set of facts in order to
Okay.
comment on it.
Ooh, okay.
But I will tell you that
Mm-hmm.
to me, knowledge is an end, not a means. In other words, that is what's valuable to me, knowledge. I want to know. And you fill in the blank. If I was sure I was going to live another 30 or 40 years, I'd probably go back to college. And it really wouldn't matter to me too much what subject it would be.
Really?
By the time I had my bachelor's degree, I knew many things, but the thing I knew the best was how to learn, or you might say how to study. It's essentially the same thing. And so I just continued to learn and study for the rest of my life, and I'm still doing it. So it's very easy for me to just go into a new area, especially now with the existence of the internet, because accessing information is much easier than it was when I was a boy. I mean, we didn't have the internet then. I had to go to libraries. I spent a lot of time in libraries. The library was my favorite place. I loved the library because it was quiet and I was surrounded by the greatest minds of earth, Socrates and Shakespeare and Einstein, et cetera, et cetera. They're just sitting on the shelves waiting for me to open their books. So I just loved it. And eventually that led me to become a polymath. But let me tell you how I got to Septemics because it ties into all of this.
Yes, please.
The story really begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, of course, at the time, I thought I was going to be engineering physical things, as did all the other engineering students. In other words, airfoils, motors, electrons, or whatever. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche because that is the area of greatest unknown and greatest mystery. And more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the son, don't understand the boss, don't understand the next door neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. That's why the world looks the way it does. And Septemics solves that problem across 35 axes. Now, let me tell you how I got to it from there. I had a long career as a human development engineer, working one-on-one with hundreds of clients of every description for cumulatively many thousands of hours. And I was using engineering principles, tactics, strategies, devices, approaches, theories, etc. My clients had no idea how I did what I did, but I got spectacular results. So I started to notice incidentally, I mean, I would be helping the client, he would be getting better. I started to notice incidentally that I could predict the outcome of the session. Now, I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, it became obvious to me after a while that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed and recorded. And as a result of our interaction, he would go up to the next level on that scale. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times.
Hi, I'm Nick Nieras, your host of the Your Worthless podcast. Now, if these real raw stories hit home, don't wait. Please follow, like, and subscribe my Spotify and YouTube. For bite-sized inspirational reels, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Don't wait. Your transformation starts today. Thank you, and bye for now.
Sometimes it happened 4, 5, 6, 7 times in the same session. And every time this occurred, it verified my hypothesis because the client knew nothing about what I was recording, what I was thinking, how I did what I did, what my theories were, or anything. All they knew is they came to me with a problem or an unwanted condition, and I got them out of it. So after a while, by 1995, I had recorded, observed, and recorded about 32 scales that I had simply observed in the sessions. Nobody knew anything about this. I just wrote them down. So I had these 32 scales that varied in length between 3 and 7 levels. Now, also in 95, one day I was pondering a difficult client. And I had this one scale in particular that had 6 levels in it that I knew was correct by then. And I realized one day that this client was at a level on that scale that I had not previously observed. In other words, that scale actually had a 7th level. And when I saw what that level was, it was obvious to me immediately where to insert it in the scale. And when I inserted that 7th level into the 6th level scale, that scale manifested mathematically. Now, having taken 26 semesters of math, having loved every minute of it, let me tell you what I mean by that. The whole point of math is you start with a formula or an equation and you coax data out of it. So the idea is that data appears to you. That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared. He just did what all mathematicians do. He manipulated the equations and the formulas, and he got down and said, wait a minute, E equals mc squared. Whoa! That changes everything. That's a conversion factor between energy and matter, and the factor is c squared. The whole world of physics changed from that. So when I say manifested mathematically, at that instant, when I inserted that 7th level in, all of these mathematical data jumped out at me. And it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. So it expanded from a line to a plane. And I had all these data interlocking, intersecting mathematical data about this scale right in front of me. And I said, whoa, whatever this is, it has to be natural law, because anything that has mathematics embedded in it is natural law. Like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence or Newton's 3 laws of motion. It's natural law. So then I thought, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that were not developed all the way. Because you have to realize I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So now, knowing what I was looking for, I studied all these other scales, and in a short period of time, they all developed into 7-level scales. And when each one did, it manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 scales based on direct empirical observation that all had 7 levels and all mathematics embedded in them. And having gone to school for 28 years, I said to myself, this looks like a new subject because I never saw anything like this before. Then I thought, wait a minute, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out so people can have it and use it. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft was finished in December of 95. And I sent it out immediately in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they responded very positively. They were not ambiguous. They had different responses, but it was definitely encouraging and laudatory. And that told me, oh, this is exactly what I think it is, a new subject that could really help people because people get this. Because it's natural law, it's not counterintuitive. You get this. Now, I don't know if you recall the first time you saw the periodic table. You were maybe 12 or 13 or 14. So when you look at it, at first blush, it makes sense because you see, okay, hydrogen is one, and then helium is two, lithium is three, and it just goes down like that horizontally and vertically, as the atomic number increases. He had about 79 elements at the time when he did that, Dmitry Mendeleev, who invented it. Now, since then, we now have something like 125 elements, and we just keep inserting them in there because it works. So every science course and science book in the world has the periodic table because it's natural law in whatever language they speak. The Chinese people have it in Chinese, but they still have the boxes and everything lined up the same way that Mendeleev did. So several people have said, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them, being a well-read person, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before, at least on Earth. I don't know about other planets, but not on Earth. And I can also say every one of these 32 scales, actually now it's 35 because I found a few more. Every one of these scales is expressed in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet that is comparable to the periodic table of elements. So there are 35 periodic tables that correspond to 35 areas of human phenomena, which is a completely new idea. Now, if I may, I'd like to tell you the names of the
Hmm.
35 scales, because then you know exactly what subject matter is addressed in the book.
Yes, yes. 'Cause that's my
Okay, so
next question. Like,
of
what are
the,
the common observations? Okay.
of the
Hey love, it is Nick Nieras here, and if you've been feeling stuck, burnt out, or like you're meant for more, but don't know where to begin, I have got something for you. This isn't just about mindset work, it's about deep soul healing, subconscious rewiring, and remembering who you really are. Now, I created a free self hypnosis audio to help you release the noise and reconnect your inner truth in just 10 minutes. You will feel the shift immediately, I promise. And if you are ready to go deeper, explore my digital guides designed to help you overcome fear, activate your confidence, and find clarity in your next move. They are your next step before full transformation. But if your soul is saying, I am ready, then apply for a one-to-one coaching with me. This is where we do the real work, transforming your blocks, aligning your life, and unlocking the confident, magnetic version of you that creates wealth your way. Head to the show notes now. Your new chapter starts with one small yes. Now let's get back to the video you're watching.
35 scales, 24 I call individual scales, and 11 I call group scales. Individual scales apply to an individual, group scales apply to a group. So these are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the reader. And let me give you an example of how that could work. You could take the scale of motivation, right? Open the book of motivation. See, I've gotten it down to only 7 basic human motivations, Well, you could say there are thousands of motivation. No, those are subsets of these. These are the 7 basic ones. All the others fit into these. And you could ask yourself, if you wish, what's my husband's motivation toward me? What's my son's motivation toward me? What's my pastor's motivation toward me? What's my grandmother's And every time you spot it, and you will be able to spot it if you know these people well, you'll have insight. So you'll spot your husband's that's why he does that. He has that motivation. See, you just had an insight. So your relationship with him just got a little bit better. And then you do it for you. Oh, that's my grandmother's motivation. Oh, I see. See, you had a little insight. Your relationship. Now, you could do this with everyone you know and everyone you have ever known. In which case you would have done this 200, 300, 400, 500 times. And every time you do, you have an insight. Every time. It's one of the axioms of the subject. When you correctly find a level, you have an insight. Because this is axiomatically true. It's just that people don't know it. Then you could take that same scale and reverse the vector and say, what's my motivation toward Fred? What's my motivation toward Joe? What's my motivation toward Alice? You see, it's the opposite question. And you could do the same thing all over again. So where you figuring out your motive toward everybody you know or have ever known. And every time you spot it, we'll have evidence. Yeah, that explains why I broke up with Joe. I had that motive, see? So by the time you finish this, you will have had 400, 500, 600 insights. So your mind is going to be much clearer. You are actually a smarter person because the insight is a result of your gaining wisdom. So now you understand what's going on around you much better. So when you see these people, you know what motivations there are. And so you can navigate that deftly. See, it's not a mystery. So
What
well,
what are the 7 basic types of motivation?
well, I don't want to go into that now because there are 35 scales, and
Okay.
we only have about an hour and a half here, right?
Yeah, we have about a
You
half an
should
hour.
know there are 35 scales, each of which
Mm-hmm.
has 7 levels. That's 245 different levels.
Oh, okay.
Each of those levels had to be ascertained, verified, and expressed in a way that would make sense to the reader. When I I told you I sent out the original transcript to colleagues of mine and got this feedback.
Yes.
Spent the next 25 years of my life working on this book. Because you have to realize, first I had to discover the phenomena. And I pretty much told you already how I did that. Well, you have to realize it's a little bigger than that. For example, I would see this in session, and then I would go out in the real world and I'd see exactly the same thing. I'd be standing online at the supermarket and I'd be watching two people talk. And I could see they're at this level on this scale that I just saw. They don't even know me. See? It's like if somebody says, this is a chrysanthemum. Okay. Well, you walk by, oh, there's a chrysanthemum. Now I know what it looks like. There it is. See? You recognize it because you know what it is. Now, some people don't know what a chrysanthemum is. Doesn't mean anything when they walk by chrysanthemums. It's just a flower to them.
Yeah.
See? Well, this kept getting verified and verified and verified. And you have to realize that before I started working on the book, I was getting this data for many decades. So after I got the phenomena, then I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system. Now, as an engineer, I'm only interested in results and facts. To engineering, opinions and beliefs are utterly irrelevant. In engineering, you cannot say, whoops, you can't just have the bridge fall down into the river. That's
Whoops.
not allowed in engineering, okay? And we
Yeah.
have all kinds of things that we do, okay? Factors of error that we do to make sure that's not going to happen. For example, if I'm building a bridge, right, and I can calculate if the bridge is completely full of cars, completely much weight that is, okay? So that's how much would be the maximum amount of weight. But I'm not going to use that figure. I'm going to add 10% to that. You see? Because then you're not going to say, whoops, because you see it sometimes, because I'll tell you, I actually study engineering failures all over the world, bridges that fall down. I pay attention, and it's bad engineering. They didn't have the right factors of error, you know? So, for instance, you might say, oh, well, we add 10% C, concrete's not going to be enough. We have to put steel reinforcement into this to make sure it holds, you see? So the calculation, so what do engineers do is they take known facts, see, and then they make calculations using mathematics to determine exactly what all of the factors are going to be going into creating this thing. You know, how many ohms is this going to have? Or what is the voltage going to be? We have it exact. See, it's got to be calculated. That is what engineers do. It's precise. Well, I can tell you, these scales were made by an engineer. They are precise, they are accurate, and they are specific, which is what you get from an engineer. Now, the product of a scientist is a theory, like the theory of evolution or the theory of relativity, right? But the product of an engineer is a thing that works, like that microphone you're using was created by engineers. This lamp over here, you know, the light bulb invented by Edison.
Mhm.
Okay. So, you know, he tried like thousands and thousands of different elements until he found tungsten was the right one that didn't burn out when he ran the current through it. That's engineering. It's a lot of hard work until you get it right. See? And that's when he was able to put out the light bulb. It changed the whole world. So the third thing about this is it took 20 years to craft this as an engineering system. Then I had to express this in a way that would make sense to the average reader.
Yes.
My intent from day one was to help the people of Earth. Because believe me, if you read my book, you'll say, wow, people need this.
I think I read your first chapter or about you before coming on to the interview, and I was like, oh my God. I told my mom I'm about to speak to a very, very smart person afterwards.
That's neither here nor there. But what's important is the book. Because
Mm.
I have been watching people use this now since 1995. That's almost 30 years. People get this. You know why they get it? It's natural law. It's like the Pythagorean theorem, right? You're like 12 years old in elementary school or middle school, and they give you this thing, the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared in a right triangle. That's not hard to get. You know, if you have a right triangle, one side is 3 and the other side is 4, well, then hypotenuse is 5. Bingo, there it is. You don't have to measure it. You can just calculate it. It's very useful. And we've known this for 2,600 years, thanks to Pythagoras. So that is what these scales are like. They are inherently axiomatically correct. And that's why I spent 25 years on this, to make sure that they were. I looked at this every conceivable way and tried to make it fail. And I couldn't near the end. So let me give you an easy way to understand this. Suppose you invited me to look at your garden. You find out that I'm into gardening, which is true. You say, Jim, come over and look at my garden. Great. So I go to Nicolette's house and I walk in there and say, oh, Nicolette has hydrangeas, irises, tulips, forget-me-nots, roses, bougainvillea, chrysanthemums, right? Now, the reason I can analyze it that way is I know a lot about flowers. And if you wanted me to, I could advise you and I could say, now these need a lot of shade, but these need more sun. And these need more water, these need less water, et cetera, et cetera. These you have to fertilize. These you really don't have. See, there's a lot to know about it. Botany. So it's a subject. Now, if you bring a 5-year-old girl into your garden, she's going to see and smell exactly what I saw and smelled. But all she can say is, these are pretty and they look nice and they smell nice. That's all she knows, right? Because she doesn't know flowers. She doesn't know a chrysanthemum from a tulip. She doesn't even know those words. Now, most adults are like that little girl as regards people. They don't know what they're looking at. That is why in the United States, more than 50% of the marriages end in divorce. Clearly, those people did not know what they were looking at. And that is why all over the world, people routinely elect morons and criminals to run the governments because they don't understand them. I look at something, how did this person get elected? How could this be, right? Clearly, the people who vote for this person did not understand. Now, I can analyze that person, of course, these 35 skills, and know exactly who that person is, better than that person knows himself. So to me, it's no mystery. I use this all the time. It's very easy to use. This is user-friendly because I designed these skills to wrap around the reader. So even though this has got math embedded in it, I went out of my way to make it not be mathematical. So there's only a few places in the book where math is even mentioned, and I explain it very clearly. There's a few places where it was absolutely necessary to explain the scale, what the math was in it. And so I explain it, which is not hard for me because I've been tutoring people since I was 14. So I have a pretty good idea on how to explain things to people who don't understand it right now, because that's what tutoring is. So I had to express this in a way that makes sense to them. So look, here's what happens. Some guy, I'm not talking about a college guy, just a regular guy, right? Works in a gas station or a grocery store, right? He opens the book and he looks at the scale and says, yeah, this makes sense to me. I get it. You know why? It's natural law. Now, there are some things that are counterintuitive and it makes them harder to learn. That is not true with this subject. This is much more like the periodic table of elements. Anybody who can read or write can learn the periodic table. It's just a question of, are you motivated to study it? Do you want to do your homework? If you want to, you can learn it because it's axiomatically true. So it's not counterintuitive. You don't have to rely on intuition to understand natural law because it's natural law. So like the Fibonacci sequence, it's natural law. So Fibonacci was this great Italian mathematician, and he saw these certain numbers kept showing up in nature. And he sort of scratched his head. Why is this number keep showing up? There's like these few numbers and they don't seem to make any sense together. So he studied this and eventually he was able to reverse engineer the formula of the numbers. In other words, what formula, if we had it, would give us these numbers as a sequence? We call that now the Fibonacci sequence. Now, once you know it, it's quite simple. Anybody can learn it. And we can calculate Fibonacci numbers to infinity if we want, just using the form. And these exist in organisms for billions of years. I mean, you get a pine cone, right? And it has like these little leaves in it that make up the cone. And if you count them one way, you get one Fibonacci number. And if you count them the other way, you get another Fibonacci number. Well, how do they know that? How does the pine cone know that? They don't. It's natural law, you see? Or sunflowers. If you count the seeds one way, it's one Fibonacci number. And if you count them the other way, it's another Fibonacci number. And nature is full of these. So it's natural law. So because it's natural law, it's inarguable and it's very useful. So let me show you how this is useful. Let's say, for example, you're dating this guy for 3 years, right? And you're thinking about getting married, right? That's a big step. Wouldn't it be reasonable for you to ask, why does this guy want to marry me, right? And that's a sensible question, right? I'm not saying to ask the partner. I'm saying open the book, look at the scale of motivation. Because why does he want to marry me? You're saying, what is his motivation? Well, you know this guy because you've been hanging around with him for 3 years, right? So as soon as you study the chapter, you're going to find it. Right? So let's say you spot, he wants to marry me because he loves me. That's level one, the highest motivation of all, love. As I stated in the book, charity, which is the same thing as love. So caritas in Latin means love, not necessarily sexual love, but any type of love, general love, platonic love. So that might not happen. You might say, wait a minute. Now that I thought about this, I think this guy wants to marry me because I drive a Maserati. I fly my own Learjet. I have I live in a $15 million condo and I have $10 million in the bank. See, that's a different motivation. See, and then when you spot that, now I understand why he does that. See, you have a little insight. See, now these things he did make sense to you because you know his motivation. Now, what you decide to do with that is up to you. Like, yeah, okay, he wants to marry me because of my money. That's not the first guy that did that, but he's smart, he's handsome, he's funny, he has a profession, he seems to be very trustworthy. So I'm going to marry him anyway. And you might live happily ever after. But that might not be the way you think about it. You might say, you know, I don't want to marry somebody who's marrying me for my money. I want to marry somebody who loves me for myself, not for my Maserati. And you might break up with him. Now, in that latter case, you might think you'd be upset about that, and you're wrong. You wouldn't. You'd be relieved. You would say, thank God I figured this out now. I dodged a bullet. This could have been a train wreck, and I got out of it. See, now when you go forward, now you can look for somebody who's going to love you for yourself. Maybe you don't even tell them you have a Maserati. See? So that's just a perfect example, simple example in real life of how to use this. But you have to realize there's 35 scales, and every person is at some level on every scale. So your level on the scale is like your blood pressure. Right now, you have a blood pressure. I don't know what it is. You probably don't know what it is because it goes up and down. Even if you took it yesterday, it might be different today. Now, when you go to the doctor, it doesn't matter whether you go to them for a cold or a headache or a broken foot. They're going to take your blood pressure. You know why? Because they know you have one and they don't know what it is. So they take it, takes 3 minutes, and they write it down every time. That's what this is like. You have a level on every one of these 35 scales. You just don't know what it is. What I tell everybody, the way to use this book is like this. This is a textbook on an entirely new subject. Study it like a textbook. Study it the way you would study a chemistry text, or a math text, or an economics text, or a biology text. Okay? You start with line 1 of page 1, and you read that line. You say, do I understand this line? Yes. And then you go to line 2. And you go through ploddingly, making sure you understand the whole book. You don't skip anything. If you follow it that way, you will get it, because I put glossaries throughout the book to give you the definitions of the words. So when you get to the end, go back to the beginning and read it again. And now on the second reading, find your level on every scale. Now, by the time you finish that, you will have had at least 35 insights about yourself. So you're going to understand yourself much better. Now I understand why I couldn't get along with Joe. I was at this level and he was at that level, or whatever it is. You see, you have insights. I'll tell you something else about this. One of the axioms of this subject is every time you correctly find a level, you have an insight, or you could call it a realization or an epiphany, every time, because it's natural law. Let's say you're evaluating your boyfriend, right? You say, where is he on this first scale? Right? And you spot it. I have an insight. Now you're a little smarter now. See, now when you go to the second scale, you bring that insight with you. Now you spot him on, I see where he's on this scale. You have another insight. Now you bring those two insights with you when you go to the third scale. So this is a fruitful source of insight. In other words, this makes you smarter. It literally makes you smarter. And let me tell you what I mean by that. For 40 years, I helped people as human development engineer. Some guy comes to me and says, Jim, I have this drinking problem. Can you help me? I say, sure. So he comes in, you know, he's telling me about it, and I can guide him using my biofeedback and everything. And about 20 minutes in, I just realized I see why I'm drinking too much. It's because of X, Y, and Z. Now, when he came into the session, he didn't know that. Now he does. What happened? He got smarter in the session. That's what an insight is. An insight is what happens when you get smarter. Now I see what's going on with this guy. See? So you didn't know that before. So here's what happens with this book. Every time you find somebody's level, whether it's your own or another's, you have an insight. Because you have an insight, you're a little smarter. Because you're smarter, it's easier to use the book. So you use it more. The more you use it, the more insights you have. Because you're having all these insights, you're getting smarter, and it's easier to use, so you keep using it. So this is a virtuous circle. So the more you use it, the smarter you get. The smarter you get, the more you use it. The more you use it, the smarter you get. The smarter you get, the more you use it. And this just keeps going around and around and around. Okay, so I have known these skills for a lot more than 30 years, which is when I wrote the first draft of the book. Because remember, I was discovering this long before that, bits and pieces of it, and writing them down. So for me, using this is as difficult as drinking water. So I can be like standing in a line at the bank, and there's two guys behind me talking. I can tell those guys are on the scale of literacy just by listening to them talk. Comes right out of their mouths.
My next question to you, Jim. Where do I fall in the scale?
All right, here's my answer to that. I tell everyone, every chance I get, never tell anyone the level of any living person on any scale. It's unethical and counterproductive. That's not what this is for. This is for illumination, right?
Mm.
So let's say you can't get along with your mother-in-law, right? That's like not a rare circumstance, right?
Yeah.
Right? So you start assessing her on all these different. I see what her basic purpose is. Oh, I see what her motivation. Oh, I see where she's on the scale of choice. Oh, I see where she's on the scale of control. So every time you do this, you're having an insight. You're understanding her better. Now, when you deal with her, you know what you're dealing with. It's just like if in your garden you have tulips and roses. If you're going to pick a tulip, all you need is a scissor. You just go out, cut it, put it in water. Can't do that with a rose. It's covered with thorns. Got to put on leather gloves, right? Got to be very careful because they'll slice you up, okay? To cut. It's a different procedure. So some people are like roses and some people are like tulips. And you need to know which one is which. So I do this all the time. So let me tell you, when I was a young man, this data didn't exist. I hadn't figured it out yet. So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. And of course, in retrospect, now I see because I've been able retrospectively to spot these persons on these scales. This person was at that scale. This is like something that happened 30 years ago. Now I see why this went awry. See? But at the time I didn't know it. So I can absolutely guarantee to your listeners that this book will prevent catastrophes, disasters, dilemmas, fistfights, indictments, lawsuits, divorces, etc., because when you meet the people who are at or near the bottom of the scales, you are forewarned. Well, let me give you an example. Adolf Hitler is at level 7 on the scale of basic purposes. I'm giving it to you because he's dead. Although he did not die in 1945, he died in the 60s. But that's another story. You can read a book about that if you want, called Lone Wolf. If the people of Germany had this material, they could have spotted that. And a lot of them wouldn't have voted for him. See, in 1933, the Nazi Party got 37% of the vote, which was a plurality, which is what got them into power. Now, if the German people had this book, a lot of them wouldn't vote for him. He would have gotten some votes, but he wouldn't have gotten 37%. He maybe would have gotten 20%. And you know who was amongst that 20%? Psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, professional criminals, war criminals, terrorists, racists, anti-Semites. See? The dregs of society. That's who would have voted for him, but that's not 37%. So specifically about Adolf Hitler, I am a serious scholar of military science. So when I was studying World War II, which was one of my specialties, I would come up to a certain thing that Hitler did, and I'd say, why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense at all. Because you have to understand, military science has been around for thousands of years. There's a lot of things we know you should do and shouldn't do. It's in the books. And every person who goes to military school studies these things and knows. You don't leave your flank exposed. You have special group. See, all these thousands of different data that we know. And he violated these basic data. For example, he had a non-aggression pact with the Soviets because he didn't want to get into a two-front war. Well, then he attacked them. So I looked at that and I thought, what sense does that make? Because Hermann Goering, who was his second in command, who wasn't as crazy as Hitler, said to him, if the Russians get into war, we will lose. That's exactly what happened. The Russians lost 20 million people in the war. But their vast population and their vast territory and their resources were more than the Nazis can handle. So the Soviets would throw, let's say, 10,000 men against 1,000 Nazis. Nazis would wipe them out. But in so doing, the Nazis would lose 500 men. See, they won, but they still lost 500 men. The Russians lost 10,000. 2 weeks later, here comes another 10,000. And that just went on for years and years because the Russians had machine guns behind the troops. If you retreated, they shot you. So you can look all this up if you want to study World War II. So I thought, why would he do this? He specifically signed a non-aggression pact with somebody he hated so that he wouldn't have a two-front war, and then he attacked them. Well, when I realized that he was at level 7 on the scale of basic purposes, it all made sense to me because the purpose of someone at level 7 is to destroy. It wasn't just destructive to the Allies. He was destructive to the Wehrmacht. He was destructive to the German people. He was destructive to the German nation. He was destructive to his own family. That's what you get from somebody who's at that level. Now, fortunately, there aren't too many people at that level. Pol Pot is another one. Look at what he did in Cambodia. Just crazy stuff. Crazy. So once in a while, you run into somebody like that, like Charles Starkweather, 1957, murdered 12 people in 10 days. And they caught him. He showed no remorse at all. I mean, if you just said something he didn't like, he just shot you. Right? He was a level 7. He was a destructive person. So this is the type of craziness. Sometimes you look at people, why would somebody do that? They're level 7. They're destructive. They're inherently destructive. So you can see these people, they're not even working for their own self-interest. They just want to destroy everything they can destroy. So when somebody like that gets in charge, you get exactly what Germany got, which is destruction. We bombed them back into the Stone Ages. So this is very useful information, okay? Looking at it at the other end of the scale. Jesus of Nazareth is at level 1 on the scale of basic purposes. The objective of someone at level 1 is transcendence. Listen to what he said. He was all about transcendence. Now, you don't have to be a Christian to be like that because there's lots of other people. Yogananda was at level 1, transcendence. You know that when he died, his body did not decay. The funeral manager, undertaker, made a declaration saying this man's body didn't decay. And if you read his famous book, Autobiography of a Yogi, you can say, yeah, this guy was about transcendence. He's not interested in money. He's not interested in fame. Not interested in sex. He was interested in transcendence. So St. Francis of Assisi, his father was a rich merchant. His father expected Francis over the business and be another rich merchant. Francis didn't want that. Francis became St. Francis of Assisi, founded the Franciscan order. He was interested in transcendence. His father didn't understand it. This goes on all the time with parents and kids. The parent has one basic purpose. The kid has another basic purpose. Now figure it out. So once you have the book, then you can understand this. Now, sometimes you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But still you understand it. So like Charles Starkweather was executed for all those people he murdered. He showed no remorse. That was the right thing to do. That's what you do with a crazy person like that. Those 12 harmless people weren't bothering anybody. This is a mass murderer. You have to execute him. So when you see, okay, this guy's at level 7, we know what we're dealing with. Okay. So there are people who can be rehabilitated in prison. Not many, but there are some. You have some guy, he robs a convenience store, he goes to prison, he says, I'm not doing that again. He gets out, and he gets a regular job and doesn't break any more laws. Okay, that happens. So if you have this data, you can make that observation. If you have children, you can say, I see, my son is at this level. That's why he's doing this. So this is whether you're running a company. You can look at somebody in your company and you want to put him in a certain post. Where is he on the scale of control? He's near the bottom of that scale. I'm not going to put him in this post. So this could save you a fantastic amount of aggravation, wasted time, wasted money. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm a single guy. So about 6 months ago, I met this gorgeous blonde. She looked like a movie star, right?
Are you really telling a
Yeah.
true story right now? Okay.
Yeah. So now we're talking to one another. She was interested in me and vice versa, right? We're going through.
Because you having done this for, I mean, the whole course of your life, every person you meet, you
That's
you're categorizing them beforehand, and then
that's what
it's
here's what happened.
almost like
That's what happened. So when you meet somebody, you have these sort of getting to know you conversations.
yes, yes,
What's your work schedule like? What do you like to do on the weekends? What kind of movies do you like to go to?
yes,
Restaurants you like, sort of finding out. So,
exactly.
oh, she says she likes Chinese food. Would you like to go to a Chinese, right? You're finding out, right? So we
Right.
have at least a half a dozen of these conversations,
Mm-hmm.
you know, getting to know you. So I realized and when she's low on this scale. Okay. So we had another conversation, right? Another day, she's low on this other scale. And we had a third conversation another day. Oh, she's low on this other scale. Wait a minute. Wait, now the light bulb is going on over my head. This is a downscale person. Yes. Yes, she looks like Lana Turner, but this is going to be a lot of aggravation for me because I could see where she was on these scales. So I just said to her very politely, I said, pass. She was shocked. You know why? I was probably the first guy that ever did that to her because she's so beautiful and glamorous,
Yeah.
right? Because I guarantee you, most guys would have jumped right in and wound up regretting it later on and would have had horror stories to say, right? Not, I could see this was not somebody I wanted to know. And I just said, pass. She was absolutely shocked. She said to me, who do you think you are? I did not say, I'm the guy who knows Septimics. It wouldn't have meant
You,
anything to her.
didn't she look you up? She would, I mean, if she was.
Not, I probably told her about my book and, you know, I say, what do you do? I'm an author. Oh, really? I'm sure I told her.
Uh-huh.
I mean, people all over the world know who I am, so it's easy to figure out. So I'm sure she did. That doesn't mean she read the book, but I didn't see her as somebody who would read this book anyway. Now, I didn't see her as an intellectual or a person who was like searching for enlightenment or anything like that. Uh, but that's not the issue. The issue is that she was at or near the bottom of many scale. And
And
so
how long what was the lead time from the time that you knew, started talking to her until the time that you said, okay, this is not it? Oh, it only took you a couple of weeks. Okay. Not even a month.
but I think about the thousands of hours that I wasted early in my life
Oh, okay.
with women that went nowhere or with women that turned out to be a train wreck or in business, or
Hmm.
I somebody who turns out to be a drug user or a criminal or something, you know? I mean, I can spot these things really well now. So, uh, it makes me it works positive and negative too because,
Yeah.
like, I'll meet somebody, "Oh, this is an upscale guy. I can see he's high on this scale. He's high on this other scale. He's high on this other scale. He's high on this is an upscale guy. I want this person around," right? And so I cultivate that relationship. Now, let me tell you, fewer than 1% of the population is at or near the top of all the scales. So you can pretty much count that out. 4% are at or near the bottom of all the scales. And those are people who like professional criminals who are also drug addicts or alcoholics who beat their wives. They're people at the bottom of these scales. You know why they're at the bottom of these scales? That correlates to those behaviors. That's the behaviors that those people have. Just read the book, it tells you. So it's not hard to figure this out. So most of us are high in some skills and low in others. So people that I know who I want to be around, I can say, okay, this guy's high in this scale, high, but he's low on this scale. So when something comes up on that scale, I know better. I know how to tiptoe around it to make it not an issue. See, and preserve the relationship rather than letting that pitfall ruin the relationship. So, for example, I have a friend, wonderful person, family man, et cetera, who I would call a political extremist.
Mm.
And as I say, in the scale of politics, those are the people who cause all the trouble, political extremists. And those are the people who are firebombing Teslas. Those are the people who attacked the Israelis on October 7th, a year and a half ago. Those are the people who try to assassinate Trump. They're extremists. When he gets into politics, I know better. I just tiptoe around it because I know what I'm dealing with. So he says, Trump, rah, 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 rah. I say, how's your son? Oh, my son is fine. Yeah, he's living in Virginia now. He's still married to a woman. Yeah. See, we're off that subject. He's telling me about the son. I'm happy to hear about the son. Okay. Well, I'm just off it. See? Because I know what I'm dealing with. I'm not going to reason with this person because he's an extremist. You know, there there are people who are immune to facts. It doesn't do any good to give them facts because they're extremists. So uh, they have this idea and they're not going to let go of it. Facts are irrelevant. So you know to get around it. So, for example, I have three sisters. Two of them conservatives, one of them is a liberal. I get along fine with all of them. You know why? I just don't let it sabotage the relationship. You know, subject comes up. I say, hey, have you seen Uncle Joe recently? Oh, yeah, he's fine. Really? What's he doing?
I can't help but to think, Jim. Now that you've created all of this, you've created systemics, right? And then now you have this vast information. So say I'm reading this book as well. So now I know, kind of know each one of my family members or close friends where they fall in the scale.
Mhm.
I change myself when I interact with them. Then, okay, I preserve the relationship based on whether I want them in or out of my lives. Now, I do that around them, and they probably, if they're aware enough, they notice how, if let's say I'm always fighting with my sister, but now that I know she's like this, I change my ways around her. Now, in
Mhm.
that way, it maybe makes the relationship better. But then, how would they adopt that kind? How do we impact change if they're not interested in knowing more? Like, why did Nicolette change her behavior toward?
There's actually a couple of different benefits to this. So let me explain this. First of all, once you know the actual level of any person at any scale, you can improve that person by moving them to the next level up. If a person is a level 4, he will be able to get to level 3. You know why? It's the next level up.
It's about improving themselves. Okay.
So if you're on the 3rd floor, you can
Okay.
go up 1 floor, you're on the 4th floor, right? Okay. So let's say I don't know anything about you, but let's say hypothetically, let's say you have a daughter, right, who's having trouble in school, right? So you notice this, right? The report cards are not so good. So you say, Mary, come over here. Let me show you this, right? So let's say Mary is in junior high. She can read this book. So you open this scale to the scale of scholarship, right? And you have your 13-year-old daughter look at this. And she says, she knows what the word scholar means. She knows she's a scholar. You say, look at this. Huh? So she looks at the scale of scholarship, right? And she'll probably say, you mean there's a scale of scholarship? You say, yeah. Where are you on the scale? Guaranteed she's going to want to answer that question because she's having trouble and you are opening a door for her. See? Going to be interested in this. So she looks at it. And here's what's going to happen. In a matter of seconds, she'll find a bracket. She'll say something like, well, I can see right away. I'm definitely not at level 1, 2, or 3 because that's the top of the scale and I'm not good at this. See, she threw out 3 levels. She got it down to 4, 5, 6, 7. She said, okay, why don't you just read the text and then you can get it exactly. She's going to want to do that because she's already starting to get into this. So she reads the text, right? And you can help her as a tutor. And now she comes back, well, I can see now I'm at level 5. That's not so good. Why am I having trouble in school? That explains X, Y, and Z. See, she has an insight. And then you say to her, we could move you from level 5 up to level 4. She says, you can? Yeah, it tells you in the book how to do that. She says, let's do it. So now you work with her and you follow the instructions in the book. Because I tell you in that chapter with specificity how to make a better scholar. It's just like baking a cake.
Wow, something lighted up in my head just now. So, how do you apply this to marketing to a group of people? How to
Okay.
entice them?
First of all, first, this applies generally if you're talking about there's individual scales and there's group scales.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, if you have a married couple,
Mm,
that marriage is going to be somewhere on that scale of relationships as a group, you see,
mm,
and you can spot that and then you know what you're dealing with. Or, for example, a government. There is a scale of government. You can look at a government and you can say, they're at that level. All right. And I tell you all in the chapter exactly what to expect, what the parameters are. Okay. And then you're going to be greatly enlightened about that government. So it might tell you, well, I want to vote for this guy and not this guy.
yeah.
See? Well, but basically, it's about analyzing human phenomena. So you analyze it. Now, but as far as helping the people, so you could look at, let's say, you look at, let's say, the scale of control, right? And you say, huh, I'm at 4 on the scale of control. That's not great. That's the middle of the scale. I'm going to move myself up to level 3. You could do that. I can tell you, if you try to go from level 4 to level 1 or 2, you will fail because it's too steep a gradient. But if you try to go from level 4 to level 3 and you make a series of, you will get there because it's the next thing up. So, it's just like in baseball. You're on first base. The ball gets hit, you go to second base. If the ball goes a long way, you go to third base. You see? But you still have to go through second base. See? You can never skip a level. And that's good because you know you
You build on it.
you spot your level. Oh, now I see what the hell is going on around here. And then you target yourself for the next level up. Now, how long it takes you to get there, what you have to do, those are wild variables. Now, if I were working with you, I could coach you with that, help you with that. But you don't need me because it's all in the book. I went out of my way to write this book in such a way. Remember, I spent 25 years writing this, that it's user friendly. Because here's the story of the book. I told you the first draft was finished in December of 95, right? I sent it out to colleagues. They loved it. So I said, okay, I'm going to rewrite this now. So I rewrote the whole thing. It was much better. And then I released it to colleagues, students, clients, friends, and I got feedback from them. See? So one guy will say, well, if you said it this way instead of that way, B, okay. So So this book was rewritten at least a half a dozen times because I'd say, okay, yeah, I want people to understand this. So I kept making it clearer and clearer and clearer. And eventually, 4 years ago, I got to a point where I said, I'm not going to live forever. People are getting this. I'm going to release this. And that's when I published it. So it's very user friendly. Anybody who can read English reasonably well and wants to improve himself or others or both can use this book. That's what it's for. Now, you might
Um,
think that everybody wants to improve himself. No, that's not true.
yeah,
Kinds of
learned that.
not interested in improving themselves. Psychopaths, sociopaths, war criminals, serial murderers, insane people, ignoramuses, morons. There's whole categories of people who, for whatever reason, are not up to that, right? Okay, this book is not for them. I mean, if I tried to give this book to somebody in the mafia, they'd say, is that going to tell me, how I can make money faster? No, it's not what it's about. Well, get it out of here. I don't want to read it. So, they're not interested in that. They're interested in cleaning out your bank account and stealing your wife. That's what they are. So, but somebody like you, this is right up your alley. You would eat with a spoon. So I do all the heavy lifting by figuring out what the 7 levels are. And let me tell you why that's significant. I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for at least 6,000 years. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Most people have problems, dilemmas, situations, difficulties. They don't know how to resolve them. More than 99% of the time, it's because they don't know the gradient. Every good coach, therapist, facilitator in the world, teacher, knows that human development must be done at a gradient. You cannot make a couch potato into an Olympic athlete. There are too many intervening levels. Maybe you can make him into a normal person. And then when he's a normal person, maybe you could make him into an amateur weekend athlete. He plays a little tennis on the weekend. But he still has a dozen levels to go to get to the Olympics, right? So that's what I'm giving you the gradients. Every one of these scales is a roadmap for success in the corresponding area. So let's say you have a coworker, right? She says, I can't control this and I can't control that. She's complaining about it. There's a scale of control. Look at the scale of control. Spot it. Where's this person on the scale of control? And you'll say, this person is near the bottom of the scale of control. No wonder she's having trouble with this. So you say, Gertrude, come over here. Look at this. Look at the scale of control. And she'll go through the same thing. She'll say, you mean there's a scale of control? You say, yeah. Where are you on the scale? So she'll look at it, and in a matter of seconds, she'll find a bracket. She'll say, well, I can see right away I'm not a level 1 or 2. I don't even understand those. Those are way over my head. It's got to be one of these lower levels. She'll say, okay, go ahead and read it, and then you can get it exactly so. She comes back. She knows herself, right? I can see I'm at level 4. That's not so good. Why do I have trouble controlling things? And if you read that, I explain there how to improve your ability to control people. It's no mystery. It's right there in the chapter. So she says, I'm going to do that, see? And then, how are you doing on controlling your people? Much better. See? This is very user-friendly stuff. It's practical. And that's why I wrote the book to give it to people to use. I wrote it in a way that the average person will be able to use. And that's why I have done over 360 interviews like this. So people will find out about this and get the book and use it. So there are people all over the world using this book now to straighten out their lives. And I already know that anybody who gets this, when I say get it, like in the word grok, the word grok, stranger in a strange land, to understand fully.
Okay, yes.
So people who get this, they are going to spread this around. It's going to happen. So like one of my students, he sees his wife is having trouble with something. He sees that she's low on the scale of belief. See? He says, come over here, look at this scale of belief. Where are you on the scale? See, he doesn't tell her. He says, look at this. Look at this. See? And she'll spot where she is. And then she can move up to the next level. And then she's doing a little bit. So that's true with all of these scales, all 35 scales. You can spot the person. So if you want, let's say you have somebody who's important in your life, whether it's your husband or your girlfriend or your mother, or what, you could spot them across all 35 axes. And when you do that, you will understand that person better than they understand themselves. Guaranteed. I've been watching people use this for 30 years. Now, sometimes you can do something about it, sometimes you can't. You might not be able to get your mother to use this. You might say, I don't want to be, but still you understand her better now, so you know how to deal with her. Because I tell you, I don't have a lot of trouble dealing with people because I know what I'm dealing with. This guy's a tulip and this guy's a rose. And this guy's a chrysanthemum. They're different. Like cats and dogs. If you treat a cat the way you treat a dog, that cat will not like you.
Yes.
Cats are different from dogs. You can't put them on a leash and go for a walk. They're not into that. No, it's a different mentality. You have to understand cats if you want to have a good relationship with a cat. And then dogs can't treat the dog the way you treat the cat. So some people are dogs and some people are cats. And I don't mean that to insult anybody. I'm just saying different types of people. And this tells you exactly. And you use the scale that's relevant. For example, if I were going to ask somebody to edit a book for me, I would want somebody who's highly literate. If I have somebody to clean my house or fix my garden or fix my automobile, they don't have to be literate. I don't care where they are on the scale of literacy. I'm not going to address that. Like I have an auto mechanic. He's like a genius. He fixes racing cars. That's like the holy grail of the racing world, the automobile world. Fixing racing cars, actual racing cars. See, only the top experts get to do that. So I have complete confidence. And not only that, I know he's honest. I bring in my car sometimes and say, check this out. They say, there's nothing wrong with that. They're honest. So I don't care where they are on these other stuff. I know that this guy, on the scale of human ability as a mechanic, is at a very high. He's at least an expert, at least. So I just bring my car, says it's doing X, Y, and Z. He says, okay, go back tomorrow, pick it up. Go back the next day. How much do you want? Here it is, fixed. It's like, because I can see that guy is an expert in this subject. I don't have to know where he is on the scale of literacy. I'm not going to discuss Spengler or Aristotle with him. Now, I do have friends with whom I discuss Spengler and Aristotle. Okay. They are high on the scale of literacy. So, it depends on the content. You use the scale that is relevant for you.
Are you a professor by any chance, Jim?
Professor?
Yeah.
It depends on what you mean by professor. I have not
Are you teaching? Are you teaching in any schools or university?
No, I did a little bit of that for a short period of time, but I've got a tremendous amount of tutoring, working one-on-one. I started tutoring people when I was 14, and I'm still doing it.
I
And
would
I've
want
got
to attend your lectures for sure.
really good at it because actually tutoring is like detective work. You have to go like Sherlock Holmes and figure out what doesn't this guy understand? Because the guy never knows what it is he doesn't understand. He thinks he knows what it is he doesn't understand, but you have to figure it out. Like let's say I'm tutoring somebody in physics, and I say, let me ask you something. What is an electron? If I don't get a correct answer in 1 second, we look up the word. He says, oh, yeah, I never thought about that. Okay. Now we go back to the passage. Does it make sense to you now? Yes. Okay, let's go on.
Also, Jim, you also must have a great level of patience in you.
I get told that by many people.
Yeah.
Because I have to
Okay.
tell you, in order to be a very good student, you have to be patient.
That is right.
I mean, you come I went to school for 28 years. I go into a new course. I don't know what is it. I don't know this thing, got like a new professor, new subject, new book, you know, you're not going to get it the first day. So you have to like be compliant. Like if the teacher says, I want you to read pages 1 through 6 before our next lecture. Okay, you do it. I always did it. So I was ready. So, you have to be, and then after a while, oh, now I see. Okay, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. And by the end of the semester, I get an A. But that takes patience. It's delayed gratification.
Indeed. Okay, Jim. Few more questions, and then you can have your lovely Sunday evening. It's nighttime where you're at. Okay, Jim. What is your heart's greatest wish?
To go to heaven and become an angel.
If you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening and the world as your legacy, what would it be?
Quote.
Yes.
Well, I would say, I've told this to many people, and it really helps. It's not Septimics, but the quote is, focus on the goals, not the barriers. Successful people do not focus on the barriers. They focus on the goals. You ever listen to Elon Musk talk?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's not focused on it. He's got thousands and thousands of barriers. He's buried in barriers. His engineers come to him all the time and say, this is not working. We got, okay, see? He doesn't focus on that. You know what he's focused on? Getting to Mars. Listen to him. He always says that. We're going to go to Mars. He is going to get us to Mars. And if you talk to successful people, they do it all the time. You know who Yogi Berra is? Famous baseball player?
Heard of him.
He was the most valuable player in the American League 3 times. Many people consider him the greatest catcher of all time. He was the slugger for New York Yankees in their heyday when they kept winning the World Series year after year after year. And somebody once asked him, did you ever think you were in a slump? He said, no. I just figured I'd get a hit the next time up. He wasn't saying, oh, gee, this guy struck me out. Listen, I was a baseball player. You can't do that. When you get in that box and that ball's coming in, there is no past. It's just you and the ball in the bat. That's it. There's no crowd, nothing. If you don't do that, you're never going to hit the ball. So, and in fact, he famously said, I can't think and hit at the same time. And he was just saying, they throw the ball and I hit it. And, I actually knew a bowling champion. One of my clients was a bowling champion. He had thrown a 300 game, which is the highest perfect score in bowling. And he told me confidentially in our sessions, it was like a secret that he had. And, he would bowl these games, bowl 275, 280, and win. And everybody would be patting him on the back and buying him drinks. And they were all asking him questions. Well, how do you put this spin on this? And what kind of a ball do you use? You know, he didn't know anything. All he knew was he picked up the ball, he rolled it down, all the pins fell down. That's all he knew. He was just a natural. He never read a book. He didn't know anything. And so he'd be like worrying, are these people are going to find out that I don't know anything? They're buying him drinks and trying to pump him for information, How do you do it? He had no idea how he did it. It was like his big secret that he divulged to me private, So clearly he wasn't focusing on any barriers. And I've been, like, I watched this. People who focus on barriers fail. People who go around saying, oh, I'm too short, or oh, I'm black, or I am Jewish, or I had no father, or I didn't graduate. They're just making excuses for failure. That's focusing on the barriers. I'm not saying it's not true. Yeah, it's true. But there's lots of people who transcended those things. Abe Lincoln had at most 12 months of school in his whole life, and he became the best lawyer in Illinois and probably our best president. According to all the scholars, they all say he was the best president. So, he had, if he wanted to focus on the barriers, he had plenty of barriers. And a few times people asked about his upbringing, and he was not happy to talk about it, okay, because it was not nice. But he was focused on the goals, He made himself a lawyer. from nothing by himself without ever going to law school. So that's what you get from successful people. You know, the people who fail, I see it all the time. They focus on the barriers. I tell them, that's a barrier. Don't focus on that. I'm not saying to ignore it. You can't ignore it. But don't focus on it. You must focus on the goal. Whatever the goal is, that's how success is made. So that's my quote. Focus on the goals, not the barriers.
How can people reach out to you, Jim?
Well, I invite your viewers to my website, which is septimics.com,
Lovely, lovely website, by the way.
where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's even a pre-recorded introduction to Septimics that's 15 minutes long that you can listen to that explains it to a new person without you even reading. Just listen to it and I explain it, 15 minutes. So there's a lot of stuff there. People like that website. It's very informative. And my contact information is on the website along with everything else. There's a lot of other stuff there to look into, and it's most people find it pretty interesting.
Any last messages for our listeners before we close this off?
Yes, I want to say that the data of Septimics is vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random. All those things in your life that you couldn't explain or seem to make no sense at all, now you'll read, now it makes sense to me.
Thank you for that, Jim. Well, that is a wrap on today's inspiring episode with Jim Marshall. Thank you for your wisdom and for always continuing to uplift others, Jim. And for our listeners, this has been Your Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Remember, if you've ever felt worthless, you are not alone. Your soul chose to be here to matter. For that reason alone, you are worthy. A huge thank you to you again, Jim, and to all of you for listening. Until then, I am Nick Nieras. Keep shining, keep growing, and always remember, you are worthy and you are enough. See you in the next episode. Thank you, Jim, for your time.
I have something to tell you.
Yes, please. Hi, Jim. Good evening to you. How are you?
Happy to see you. Good evening.
Thank you so much for saying yes to be interviewed today. I'd like to introduce myself to you formally and to all of our listeners listening for the first time. My name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled Your Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, if you'd allow me, I'd like to read your introduction to all of our listeners, and then we can get right into the conversation. So, hey everyone, we have Mr. Jim Marshall here with us. Mr. Jim Marshall has devoted over 50,000 hours to study and practice multiple dimensions of human potential and development. He received a classical education at I hope I'm not I'm pronouncing this correctly, Jesuit military prep school, was accepted into engineering school while still a junior in prep school, and attended college on academic scholarship. Now, while still an undergraduate, he began the study of alternative arts and sciences, which today would be described as transformational and holistic. After 28 years of formal education, okay, that's almost 3 decades, he had a long career as a human development engineer. Now he has successfully treated and or trained hundreds of clients and is the inventor of Septimics and several consciousness expanding system. Wow, I need to know more about you, Mr. Marshall. So thank you for saying yes and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So okay, before we start off anything serious about what Septimics is, can you please share with us what was it like growing up as a Jim Marshall? Love this episode? Now, transformation doesn't end here. Head on to @holistic.lifestyle_with_Nick. That is on my Instagram. Or head on to my website, www.denigneras.holisticlifestyle.com for more info on my coaching framework, which is the Worthy, Authentic, and Abundant Framework, digital guides, and my upcoming events such as retreats and master classes and workshops.
Now, I also do intuitive readings where we get to check on your soul path